I am not teaching, I am publicly learning. Hi and welcome to Learning for the Life in the UK test, part 593, by doing leg stretching. And if you participate in the leg stretching, it is at your own risk. So we're starting, we're bringing one leg in front, we're placing the heel onto the ground, and we're pulling the toes in. And from time to time, we're going to contract the quad muscles. So we're starting with a contraction of the quad muscles. Now we came across the public service or the civil service, and in that book, Life in the UK Test Handbook, there wasn't really explained what that is, and we tried to find it out. And we looked a bit at the government sites, and that was more if we want to work for them. We didn't really say what jobs that are, but they named a few. These they named them marine biologist, for example, or veterinarian surgeon, or weapon engineer, or administrative jobs. And then it became more clear it is mostly about jobs in offices. They said something about job centers and visa centers and places where driver's licenses are given out, or pensions and benefits. So these offices, where people can go to make these paperwork which we need, releasing the contraction. And then we looked a bit further, and where we will come also back when we went to Wikipedia. And when there was written civil service, and 500,000 people here in the United Kingdom working in the civil service, and 100,000 of them are working in the Department for Work and Pensions, 50,000 Ministry of Defence, 80,000 Revenue and Customs, and 40,000 National Offender Management Service, and contract again. And then also at Her Majesty's Court and Tribunal Services, Home Office, UK Border Agency, Crown Prosecution Service, Welsh Government Security and Intelligence Services, Identity and Passport Services, Crown Office of and Procurator Fiscal Service, Department of Energy, Department for Transport, for International Development, Cabinet Office, Royal Fleet Auxiliary, Ordnance Survey, Office for Standards and Education, HM Treasury, Food Standards Agency, 1,000 people. So a bunch of these jobs, 500,000 people are working there, and they are making these, that how all works. Wikipedia said here, it is the bureaucracy or secretariat of Crown employees that support His Majesty's government, the Scottish government or the Welsh government, and is led by the Cabinet of Ministers. So they are making the bureaucracy, what the government says, all the things. And we're releasing the contraction. 500,000 the civil workers. So basically we have the answer. We wanted to know what it is, and it are around 500,000 civil service people, and they are doing the bureaucracy of government in all these offices. And we're contracting for last time. And on that website, on the government, we found also a bit more by the way out on our way. And that is that all these people have to have some qualifications, but that people can work there, people can change to work in there, and they seem to be working for the government, and there might be some benefits of working for not private companies, but more for the government. We don't really get it all, it's just something that. And basically we're just here to doing the principles of the core values of the civil service that we want to find out and making a video about it. They were listed in the book. These were integrity, honesty, objectivity, impartiality, and neutrality, political neutrality. And we're bring the other leg in front. So we have the answers we wanted, more or less, but we're contracting again on quad muscles. We try to find out a little bit more. We have another question. What is the difference between civil service and public service? But that's all not necessary. We just keep on doing a bit more research in all these directions. But we are not really searching for anything that's right now in particular. Now, Wikipedia then said something about the public sector. And in this public sector, 5 million people are working. 500,000 people are working as civil service, and 5 million people in the public sector. Now, the point is, we are not really here to understand that now 100% for the Life in UK test. That's a bit too far off. But we're already here. Let's do a bit more research of what is happening here. 500,000 civil workers, but 5 million public sector. What is it? Where's the difference? Now that graphic here by Wikipedia says that 1.6 million people are working by the NHS, 1.5 million in the education, and 1 million in public administration. Now, what are now the civil workers doing? 500,000 of them, they are working on all these bureaucracies. What is now the public administration? So we're just doing a bit more research in that direction. The public sector, also called the state sector, is the part of the economy composed of both public services and public enterprises. We never heard the term public enterprise here before, and we will link to the conjecture of the QGYZ. Public sectors include the public goods and governmental services such as the military, law enforcement, public infrastructure, public transit, public education, along with public healthcare, and those working for the government itself, such as elected officials. The public sector might provide services that a non-payer cannot be excluded from, such as street lighting. Services which benefit all of society rather than just the individual who uses the service. So everyone benefits from these things, like street lighting. Public enterprise or state-owned enterprise are self-financed commercial enterprises that are under public ownership, which provide various private goods and services for sale and usually operate on a commercial basis. We're contracting again. Organizations that are not part of the public sector are either part of the private sector or the voluntary sector. The private sector is composed of the economic sectors that are intended to earn a profit for the owner of the enterprise. Voluntary, civic, or social sector concerns a diverse array of non-profit organizations emphasizing civil society. In the United Kingdom, the term wider public sector is often used, referring to public sector organizations outside central government. Okay, let's go on to the other pages. Civil service. In the United Kingdom, the civil service is the permanent... Okay, we have it. That was the thing. Now, next exercise. The leg to the outside, the anchor chain stability test, the toes are pointing forward, and we're pressing with a leg a bit to the ground. Public service, or service of general. That's just Wikipedia, so that's not officially. Is any service intended to address the needs of aggregate members of a community, whether provided directly by a public sector agency, via public financing available to private businesses or voluntary organizations, or by private businesses subject to government regulation. Some public services are provided on behalf of a government's residents or in the interest of its citizen. Examples of such services include the fire services, police, air force, paramedics, and public service broadcasting. Okay, public service. Civil service, private sector, public sector. We're coming closer. Even where public services are neither publicly provided nor publicly financed, they are usually subject to regulation, beyond that applying to most economic sectors for social and political reasons. Public policy, when made in the public's interest and with its motivations, is type of a public service. Let's go on. Private sector. Releasing conjecture of the given later. The private sector is the part of the economy which is owned by private groups, usually as a means of establishing for profit or non-profit, rather than being owned by the government. I think we understand private sector. These are just the companies working for themselves. Okay, voluntary sector. In relation to public services, the voluntary sector is the realm of social activity undertaken by non-governmental, not-for-profit organizations. This sector is also called the third sector, in contrast to public sector and private sector. Okay, we're trying to find out civil service and public service, but I think we understand the public sector, the private sector, and the voluntary sector. Civic sector or social sector are all the other terms used for the sector, emphasizing its relationships to civil society. Voluntary sector activities are important in many areas of life, including social care, childcare, animal welfare, sport, and environmental protection. Press again into the ground. Okay, we understand the sector part. There's the public sector, the private sector, and the voluntary sector. The public sector, this is the government doing, and maybe even some other things for all the government. We don't really understand the differences, but that is the public sector. The private sector, these are the companies working for themselves. A person makes a company and then earns money. And the other thing is the voluntary sector. The realm of social activity undertaken by non-governmental, not-for-profit organizations. Okay, they are non-governmental. Let's go to that. Non-governmental organizations is an entity that is not part of the government. This can include non-profit and for-profit entities. Okay, that leads too far. There's nothing really, no? Okay, we try to understand a bit more. Public enterprises. State-owned enterprise is a business entity created or owned by a national or local government, which I name the leg, either through an executive order or legislation. Press button in the front. State-owned enterprise aim to generate profit for the government, prevent private sector monopolizes Monopolies provide goods at lower prices, implement government policies, or serve remote areas where private businesses are scarce. The government typically holds full or majority ownership and oversees operations. State-owned enterprises have a distinct legal structure with financial and developmental goals. Economic theory use natural monopolies. State-owned, was known SOEs, are common with natural monopolies because they allow capturing economies of scale while they can simultaneously achieve a public objective. For that reason, SOEs primarily operate in the domain of infrastructure, railway companies, strategic goods and services, postal service, arms manufacturing and procurement, natural resources and energy, nuclear facilities, alternative energy delivery, politically sensitive business, broadcasting, banking, dormant goods, alcoholic beverage, and marigold. SOEs are also frequently employed in areas where the government wants to levy user fees, but finds it politically different to introduce new taxation. Next SOEs can be, that doesn't have to be for the United Kingdom, what does that mean? Effect around the world. Europe? Okay, nothing here, specifically. The United Kingdom, okay, we don't really understand it, but it makes a bit sense. We're releasing the stretch and keeping it like that. Now, the basic question is now, what is the difference between civil service and public service? Civil service are 500,000 people. We have it pretty directly. Let's go back to the public sector, public service. Civil service, public service. A public service is any service intended to address the needs of aggregate members of a community, press again into the ground. Whether provided directly by a public sector agency via public financing available to private businesses or voluntary organizations, or by private businesses subject to governmental regulation. Some public services are provided on behalf of the government and the residents or in the interest of its citizens. The term is associated with a social consensus usually expressed through democratic elections that certain services should be available to all, regardless of income, physical ability, or mental acuity. I never heard acuity before. Examples of such services include the fire service, police, air force, paramedics, and public service broadcasting. Even when public services are neither publicly provided, like to be outside, we're doing the exercise, the hydraulic car jack, windmilling up and again down, flexfoot. Even where public services are neither publicly provided nor publicly financed, they are usually subject to regulation beyond that applying to most economic sectors for social and political reasons. Sectors. The National Bureau of Investigation headquarters of building. Okay, just some pictures. In modern developed countries, so not specifically for the UK, the term public services or service of general interest often includes courts, education, electricity, emergency services, environmental protection, healthcare, mail, military, policing, public buildings, public broadcasting, public libraries, public parks, public policy making, public utilities, public transporting, social services, state school, telecommunication, transportation infrastructure, urban planning, waste management, water supply network. In developing countries, public services tend to be much less well developed. For example, water services might only be available to the wealthy middle class. Okay, history characteristics. A public service may sometimes have the characteristics of a public good, being non-rivalrous and non-excludable. But most services may, according to prevailing social norms, be underprovided by the market. In most cases, public services are services. Okay. In the UK, the process of assessing the needs of the people of an area and then designing and securing an appropriate public service to meet those needs is often called commissioning. Commissioned services may be delivered by organizations in the public sector, private sector or third sector. In the UK, the process of assessing the needs of the people of an area and then designing and securing an appropriate public service to meet those needs is often called commissioning. Commissioned services may be delivered by organizations in the public sector, private sector, or third sector. When the private or third sector is involved, the process of commissioning is usually linked with the process of procurement to determine who will provide the services at what cost and on what terms. Commissioning is often used as a cyclical process. Okay, we're coming way closer. I think actually very rapid and very fast. We're going to the last exercise. This is more than just a little bit understanding what is the police. I think we are already pretty close to economic and infrastructure and how society will work. We will continue here with the implications of this and with the other thing I just opened in the next part. So thank you very much and until next time.